Yo, what's going on guys? It's Sungod here, and today we're gonna be doing a season 15 jungle tier list, and this is not gonna be like a high elo or low elo tier list. It's gonna be a general tier list, meaning that it's just going to be like a general opinion of one certain champions across all elos and across all servers. So what does that mean exactly? Well, it's not strictly going to be just for NA server or whatever, it's just going to be for all servers combined. Also, we're going to be taking like Amumu as an example. Amumu is not very great in higher elos because he's very easy to outplay, but in lower elos he is fairly strong on its own. People don't really dodge the Q all that well, or they don't really know how to punish the Amumu. Therefore he's going to be generally strong across all elos, but not very strong in higher elos, and therefore that's also going to be considered. So let's get started. So Amumu, from my perspective, is gonna go into B tier. Like I just said, he's not very good in higher elos because he's very easy to outplay, but he's still very good on its own. He does a good amount of damage as a tank, even against other tanks, because of his max percent HP damage and his build, and for that reason he is gonna go into B tier. Bel'Veth, from my perspective, is gonna go straight into S tier. She's not good enough to go into Z tier because other Z tier champions are just going to dominate Bel'Veth no matter what, but she is still very strong on her own, on all regions and across all elos, and she can definitely dominate a game on her own. She can hold on her own, and she is very solid in general. Bren, from my perspective, really lost that power after the nerf, and he does take quite some time to get online, and from my perspective he is gonna go into C tier. He's just not strong enough right now to really consistently carry every single game, and for that reason Bren is gonna go into C tier, very close to B tier, but just not enough. Like, he definitely needs like a little bit of power to get into B tier again. So Bren is gonna go into C tier. Camille. So Camille is not often picked, and when she is picked, she's not gonna perform all too well. Like, her clearing speed is just not good enough to compete with most meta junglers, and for that reason she is gonna go into C tier. Same thing as Brand. She does need some power to really get online, does snowball fairly decently, but she's just too coin flip to consistently carry games. For that reason, Camille, C tier. Dinah, from my perspective, is gonna go into A tier. So Dinah is of course not as strong as Bel'Veth, but her build with Liandry's and Maker and Conquer does really well into most matchups. She can snowball really hard. She has a lot of versatility. She's a good AP picked with a lot of champions. Granted, you master Diana. I see a lot of people just picking Diana blindly, not really knowing how to play the champion, and as much as she seems very straightforward, a lot of people don't really know like the ins and out of Diana, and for that reason she's still gonna go into A tier, but you really need to put some games to really master a champion. So yeah. Mundo has been popularized a little bit once again, but he's really strong on its own. He snowballs really hard. His clear is pretty insane. His scaling is insane. But Mundo, from my perspective, is gonna go into B tier. He's really easily abusable. If you know what you're doing against a Mundo, he's very prone to getting screwed over like in the early game, and you need to disrupt his clear for him to not get online in the game. Even though we are in a meta where health scaling is really insane, you really should punish a Mundo in your early game so that he doesn't really get ahead all too much. And for that reason, Mundo is going to go into B tier. He is solid, but I don't recommend him to play all games. Echo is gonna go into B tier. Echo takes too long to get online, doesn't really do all that much pre-3 and pre-6, and also pre-1 item, and I don't really recommend to play the champion because he just gets completely screwed over by most meta junglers. He can't really do much. He does snowball extremely hard, of course. Granted, you have like 1 or 2 items and some AP, but he's definitely more of a mid to late game champion, and then he becomes a threat. But we are again in a meta where early game junglers are gonna take the crown, so for that reason he's gonna go into B tier. Elise is gonna go into S tier. So Elise is really close to getting to Z tier, but she doesn't quite cut it. Like, her scaling is not that great, but her early game with Bel'Veth is very strong. Her damage output is really insane, and for that reason she's gonna go into S tier. She can consistently carry games. Granted, you know what you're doing on the champion. Evelyn is quite hard to rank right now, because if it was from my perspective and my perspective only on the champion, I would probably put her between B tier and A tier. But I know a lot of people have been complaining at how bad Evelyn is right now. So I'm just gonna go with the general opinion right now and not just my own, and put her into B tier, low B tier. She can carry games, she snowballs extremely hard, but I think a lot of people are too scared on Evelyn to really make her work right now, and I don't recommend you to play her if you don't really know what you're doing. Fiddlesticks is, from my perspective, and this is solely from my perspective, is gonna go into S tier. So why is Fiddlesticks into S tier? Simply because if you are really good on the champion and you know exactly what you're doing, and you know you mastered his clear, you know exactly how to play around the enemy jungle, he is really great on his own. He can fend off most people that is gonna counter jungle him. Obviously, if you're against an Olaf, you're just not gonna have a good time, but Fiddle can gain a lot of time for people to just rotate to you. Even if you're getting invaded, he snowballs extremely hard. He's good against tanks, can go legendaries, very versatile. His totems are also very useful in the jungle. And right now, from my perspective, Fiddle is S tier, 100%. Gragas is more of a counter pick. If they have like a lot of like assassins that jumps on you and all that good stuff, and Gragas is gonna do very decently. But from a general standpoint, I would put Gragas in B tier. I think Gragas right now like just has like too slow of a clear, snowballs extremely hard of course, but he definitely needs some time to get used to, and that's just not given to everyone. So Gragas is gonna go into B tier. Graves is gonna go between S tier and A tier. I would put him in A tier. I think Graves definitely lost like a little bit of power like in the recent patches, and I would definitely put him in S tier if it wasn't for the new changes altogether. He scales really well. His early game is pretty decent, but there's just better than Graves right now, and that's just the truth. I would say like crit items are not really great on him. Lethality items are obviously still good, but definitely loses some power budget just because of the items themselves. So Graves is gonna go into A tier. Gwen is kinda a hard one because Gwen kinda has the Echo Syndrome in the sense that she definitely needs some items and her level 6 to really become strong. And you know, most of the time if you're playing against like an early game jungler or even Fiddlesticks, to be honest, like you're just not gonna provide the same amount of value as these champions. So I would say she carries extremely hard when she gets her items and when she starts scaling and all that good stuff. She's really good against tanks, and for that reason solely, I'm gonna put her into A tier just because she's just amazing into the current meta champions. So Gwen is gonna go into A tier. Ivern is, from my perspective, going to go into low S tier. Why low? Because again, Ivern is a support utility jungler that does a decent amount of damage, to be honest, but let's be honest, like he's just not as good as most of the high S tier jugglers like Bel'Veth, Elise. So for that reason, I'm still gonna put Ivern into S tier. His clear speed is extremely fast. He can hold on his own like very easily. So Ivern, S tier. Jarvan is gonna go into low A tier from my perspective. Why? Because I would say Jarvan is just way too weak in the early game right now. He is still gonna be able to do a great amount of things like in the early game, especially like into most meta junglers, but you know, he just doesn't have like this carry potential that most of the meta junglers do. And do keep in mind, you know, I'm gonna say like, hey, this guy is gonna go into high A tier, low A tier, but Jarvan's most definitely into low A tier. So he's not as strong as Diana and Grace, but he's not weaker either. His mid game is really nice. His team fighting is great. He's very tanky, and items work pretty well on him right now. Jax is obviously going to be picked more as a counter pick, and in some games he's going to be really amazing, but does take a little bit too long to get online from my perspective, and for that reason Jax is gonna go into B tier. I'm not gonna talk too much about the champion. It's very if you play Jax, you know that he's not in the greatest state right now, but you can still do a good amount of things on Jax. For that reason, he's gonna go into B tier. Karthus is hard, to be honest. I think Karthus is a really great solo queue champion, especially like with the new rune right now. He does a really good amount of damage. He can carry games really hard, but he's just not as strong as most meta junglers right now. So he is gonna go into low S tier 100%, and I definitely think that he deserves this spot. I would say like a lot of people pick Karthus to really get some LP, and it's true, like the champion is elo inflated, but if you're a really good jungler, you know how to play against the Karthus, and unfortunately it's kind of hard for Karthus to get back into the game if you're playing against like an aggressive jungler. So S tier is perfect. Nocturne is gonna go into A tier. I think Nocturne is a great champion. He tanks a lot of damage. He has a good clear. He scales pretty well. His utility is one of his strengths. However, I would say Nocturne just lacks like a little bit of mobility right now, especially we're in a meta where, you know, everyone moves at Mach 20. So I would say Nocturne is a great pick. He's solid, he's consistent, but he's not as good as most S tier junglers right now. So Nocturne A tier. Alright, moving on, we have Kayn. So Kayn is definitely going to be like a controversial one from my perspective, but I can't put Kayn like higher than B tier, honestly, because his blue form is not that great, and his snowballing, he does snowball really hard. Either it's on blue Kayn or red Kayn, and he can become unstoppable. But if we do use this argument, then you know we can just put Echo into A tier, for example, but I just can't do that because Kayn just doesn't do enough in most games. He can't really reliably take over games every single game. He is a really good jungler if you're looking to start playing jungle, but since this is like a general tier list, I'm gonna be putting Kayn into B tier. Just takes too long to get online, and yeah, I think this spot fits in perfectly. Lee Sin is gonna go into A tier. I think Lee Sin has always been a great jungler. The better you are on the champion, then the better you are gonna be in the jungle. He really scales with your jungle knowledge and how good you play the champion itself. The same thing goes with like some other champions here in the tier list, but definitely think Lee Sin suits the A tier perfectly. He is pretty consistent in like most games, and the better you are on the champion, like I said, the higher in the tier list he is gonna go. Mastery is going to go into A tier. So The reason as to why I would put Mastery in A tier is because he does quite well into most meta junglers. Like his early game is actually not that bad, but the same thing goes as Lee Sin. Mastery is definitely not an easy champion to play by no means. He has like quite intricate like auto attack cancels. He scales really hard, but you really need to know what you're doing on Mastery if you're gonna be picking him. And obviously, like in some team comps, he's just gonna get completely screwed over. And I definitely think A tier is just the perfect spot for him. Moving on, we're gonna be putting Kha'Zix into B tier. I think right now, like in the current meta, Kha'Zix just doesn't provide enough. He's not weak by no means. He can carry games, but I would say he just gets completely screwed over by most higher meta junglers right now. And for that reason, and because of his versatility, he is still gonna go into high B tier, so let's just put him here, but just doesn't do enough right now to be like a little bit higher. At the end of this tier list, we're gonna be putting like some champions more to the left, so left to right matters. Qiyana is quite a hard one, but I definitely think Qiyana deserves to be in B tier, and honestly like in mid B tier. Why? Because again, Qiyana is the same as Lee Sin in Mastery. She really scales off your jungle knowledge and your champion knowledge, and the better you are on Qiyana, the better you're gonna make her work. She's really hard to play, so I definitely would not recommend her for a first timer, but I wouldn't disagree for you to play Qiyana if you're really good on the champion. I think she scales extremely hard, and if you know what you're doing, you know, you can be versatile with your builds, go for Conquer, Black Cleaver, Hubris, or just go for full assassin, and you're gonna be doing just fine. She's just the assassin that's team fight queen, if you will. Kindred is gonna go straight into S tier. I don't think that's a contest. Why S tier? Well, I think if you know the champion, you know exactly what I'm talking about. She's good into every single team comps and into pretty much every single matchup as well. She can carry games very reliably. Items work really well on her. She can, like her build with Trinity Force Collector and LDR right now is extremely strong. For that reason, our little Kindred is gonna go into S tier. Lilia is gonna go into high A tier. She's really close to being S tier right now, but because of her recent nerfs, I don't think she packs as much of a punch than most meta junglers right now. She just needs like a little bit more in her power budget to really be super consistent in order to become S tier, if not more. Lilia is the type of champion where if you nerf her like a little bit, she breaks, and if you buff her a little bit, she breaks the game in a good way. So I think Lilia, actually scratch that. I would say like Lilia, if you do nerf her, she's still gonna be viable because of her kit being like fairly toxic. You know, all her abilities are AoE, and she provides like a lot of utility, and she does go fast, but I would say Lilia right now just needs like a little bit more, like I said, in a power budget to really be higher on the list. Maokai is gonna go into B tier. I don't think there's really much to add here. I don't think Maokai is all that great right now. His clear speed is not the best. He gets kind of screwed over by most people, most champions like higher in the list right now. So Maokai is gonna go into B tier. Alright, next we have Nico. Nico is an interesting one because I don't see many people play her, but she's not weak. I think like if you really know how to play Nico and you're good at jungle, like you're actually gonna be carrying games with her. She's really insane, but the problem is not a lot of people know about Nico and does not play her enough. And if you were to play her, you would see that she's actually not a bad jungler at all. So that's why I'm gonna be putting her in A tier, and I do recommend you to play some games on Nico to really have like a good idea on like what I'm talking about. All right, the controversial one is gonna be Nidalee. So if you watch and if you know me, you know I'm always gonna be putting like Nidalee super high, but I'm gonna be putting Nidalee in high S tier. So the reason as to why I'm not putting Nidalee like in Z tier this time is because, you know, I've always had like this question from viewers, students, and other people, like why are you ranking Nidalee so high? Well, the reason as to why is because, you know, when I play China and Korea high elo, and I know for a fact the champion is ridiculously OP right now, but the problem is that people don't really know how to play around in Italy, like in Europe and NA and other regions. So that's why like she does quite have like a harder time in those regions. But if you were to play Korea or China, like you would know how strong the champion actually is. So for that reason, I'm gonna be putting Nidalee in high S tier and not in a Z tier this time. Rammus is gonna go into low B tier. I think Rammus clear speed right now like really sucks. He's just not, there's so many like better options when it comes to tanks, and he doesn't just provide enough. He's just situationally like really good into like some auto attackers, but right now we're in a meta where auto attackers are not very common, let's say that. So Oran's gonna go into B tier. Nunu, same thing. I think Nunu is gonna go into B tier as well. It just does not quite match the power of like A tier champions. If you are an OTP on Nunu, like you're probably gonna make it high, but just not quite cut it for like higher tiers. So Nunu is gonna go into B tier. Same thing when it comes to Olaf. I think Olaf right now, there's just so many better options, and you know, Olaf really used to be like that 1v9 jungler back in the day, like season 8, 9, 10, even 11, but after the durability patch and the changes made to Olaf, he just does not quite have this agency that he used to have, and for that reason our boy Olaf is gonna go into B tier. Pantheon is an interesting one, so straight into, I would say mid A tier. Why? Because I would say like if you really know the champion, you know for a fact Pantheon is really good at 1v9 in games, and if you're an OTP, it's even better because you know the inside out of Pantheon. The champion itself is really strong. He doesn't quite fit the jungle playstyle, but you know, you just have to know the champion in order to really carry games, and for that reason he's gonna go into A tier. So really a really interesting pick from my perspective. Poppy is gonna go into, I would say like high mid B tier. So Poppy is obviously like the champion that just peels carries the best, but she does have some playmaking potential. Her Q damage is fairly good for clearing jungle as well, and she could potentially, and I say potentially, very rarely be picked in higher elos. So that's why Poppy is going to be like into B tier. Obviously there's so many better options, but still gonna be putting her like pretty high in this tier list, higher than I thought I would, to be honest. Rek'Sai is gonna go into A tier. One of the least played champion right now in the game, and it's kind of sad because I think a lot of people forgot what Rek'Sai does, to be honest. And I definitely think the champion is still in a great spot. I'm not gonna be putting Rek'Sai very high in this tier list, but that does definitely deserve her spot in A tier. And yeah, it's her, it's a female, guys. Alright, moving on. Rengar. So Rengar definitely got some of his power budget back with the recent buffs, and to be honest, you know, like Rengar is an OTP champion, and if you were to play Rengar all the way to Challenger, you probably could, but you would definitely have like a hard time doing so. So from my perspective, like if you're an OTP and you're really good at jungle, you can probably get away with Rengar, but he's just not very consistent to be played like in all helos and servers, sorry. And from my point of view, Rengar is gonna go into high B tier. So let's put Rengar here. He deserves a spot. Next, Naafiri. I honestly don't know why people even play Naafiri. I think like the champion is fairly useless right now, and I don't feel like she has her spot in any of the lanes. I'll be honest. That's what I think about Nefiri. I never see this champion being played, and when I do, I'm like, yeah, but she's not a very strong mid laner, she's not a strong top laner, she's not a strong jungler, so where does she belong? This champion was fairly new. I think she's like 1 year old, but she just doesn't have like her spot in any of the lanes right now. So I definitely want Riot to give like her identity back. So yeah. Nautilus is C tier. I see some people play him sometimes in the jungle, but I think they're playing a little bit too much Wild Drift because, believe it or not, Nautilus is really strong in Wild Drift and does a lot of damage. But when it comes to League of Legends, really poor clear, has obviously like a lot of CC, but let's be honest, like our little Nautilus is so much stronger as a support mid laner or even top laner. It's a really interesting champion, to be honest. Shaco. So many people play Shaco. Like, that's the crazy part about it. I think Shaco is a super fun champion to play, and that's why he's like played this much. But Shaco is Shaco, guys. Like, I would say like Shaco is in high B tier as well, probably like right under Mundo here. Doesn't really do all that much, does have like this versatility, but the type of champion that even if he has kills can't really consistently like snowball games as much as he would like in early seasons, right? We all remember the rampage of Shakos back in the day. So Shaco is gonna go into mid B tier. Shyvana is gonna go into B tier as well. I'm sorry guys, I think a lot of people love Shyvana, but she's just too useless in the early levels. She's very predictable, very easy to get a lead against. So for that reason, Shyvana is gonna go into B tier. Shen, C tier, doesn't really belong in the jungle. I know he's been played like a little bit like in pro play, but nothing crazy. Like right now, like Shen is just not strong enough, and I saw some people asking me if he would belong in the jungle one day, and I would say not really. Not really. Sion is actually gonna be placed like higher than you would think. I would say like just because the champion is just completely turbo broken in general, like his stats are just way too high. Like you're gonna have like a hard time getting a lead against the Sion, because the more the game goes, the more HP he's gonna have, and the more HP he's gonna have, the more AD he's gonna have because of a certain item. So for that reason, Sion is actually not that bad of a jungler if you really think about it. So Sion B tier. Sylas D tier again. Champion I love playing, and I'm super sad that Sylas is not stronger right now, but his clear is just too dog shit, unfortunately, and I really hope that they nerf Sylas enough so that he can be played like in most games, but buff him for jungle, because he is most definitely a super fun champion to play. I just think his AP ratios are just too high, and because his AP ratios are just too high, him being a jungler is a problem, because he can stack Magi's without really dying and then just completely destroy a game by himself no matter what. So Sylas is gonna go into C tier. I'm gonna be putting him like in higher C tier, so probably like around here. So that's that. Talia is a hard one, but I'm gonna be putting Talia into, I would say like low A tier. Low A tier is just a perfect spot for her. She's most definitely better than most B tier champions, and she can carry games very efficiently. Her clear is not that bad, and if you really know what you're doing on jungle and you have some experience with Talia, you're gonna do just fine with her. So A tier is just perfect. Talon is a pretty controversial one too, because not a lot of people like really know how to play Talon. And because this is more of a general tier list, I'm gonna be putting Talon into A tier. You do have to put some games with Talon. Like you're gonna be having to put like a lot of games if you really want to make the champion strong. But if you see Talon, for example, like on the Chinese servers, or even on the Korean servers, or even in high elo EOS, like we have some junglers like Chaos that can play him to like 2000 LP. This champ is insanity if you really know what you're doing. He's a really strong jungler. Definitely recommend you to pick him out if you're looking for a fun playstyle and you're looking for a really high mastering curve. Twitch is absolute dog piss. I don't recommend you to play him at all. Nothing much to say here. Udyr, guys, Udyr is not Z tier, S tier, or even A tier. Udyr is B tier. I think too many people are just too scared of the champion and they think it's Udyr, I can't even invade him in the first place. And that's exactly what the problem is because people are so scared of Udyr that they never invade the champion, and because they never invade him, like he can get away scot-free with like full clears on repeat, and there isn't really much you can do when it comes to that point. So Udyr, from my perspective, is gonna go into high B tier, like probably a little bit above Amumu, but nothing more, nothing less. Vi is most definitely gonna go into a pretty high A tier. Vi is really solid as a champion, and she can and she will like really be really decent in like most games. She's very consistent. She provides a lot to the team. She's very tanky. Her R is of course infamous for being super annoying to play against, because you're pretty much forced to buy like a Zonia's or anything else, or even an Age of 9 if you really want to be doing anything against that. For that reason, like Vi is still gonna go into A tier. Her power is really strong right now, and she most definitely deserves her spot into high A tier. Viego, our first Z tier. So Viego has been too strong for too long since release, and there's probably like some moments where Viego was like a little bit weak, but it's been far too long since Viego has been way too strong in the current meta, and for that reason we're gonna be putting our boy into Z tier. There's nothing much to say. He is just way too good. Warwick is gonna go into low B tier. Does not have enough mobility. He doesn't scale good at all. Can't reliably snowball games either, and he does require a lot of mechanical prowess to pull off, so B tier. Alright, next up we have Chondo. I would say Chondo right now just does extremely well against tanks and most team comps, to be honest. He's really slept on right now, and I definitely think he has grounds to be a fairly decent champion, and for that reason our little boy Chondo is going to go into B tier. Volibear kind of has the Warwick syndrome, meaning that he's just not too mobile and doesn't really do great right now. Needs like a little bit more power budget to really get back in the meta, so for that reason he's going to go into low B tier. Wukong is gonna go into S tier. He is our new S tier champion, and he is very strong in most games right now. Items work really well on him, and most of the time like he's really consistent, although he does have like some bad team comps to play against, so you definitely do have to keep that in mind. So S tier is just the perfect spot for him. Hecarim is gonna go into, I would really say like Hecarim is into mid B tier. He definitely still needs like a little bit of power like in the early game if he really wants to make it back, but I like Hecarim in this spot. I just think he's in the perfect spot right now and doesn't need to get buffed or nerfed. I just think he's just right. Mordekaiser, I would say, is most definitely better than Rammus right now, and probably will put him like here. Yeah, here is perfect. So I would say like you can pick some Mordekaiser with Ghost and still carry some games, going to Liandries and all that good stuff. He is not very advised to be played, but if you really do enjoy the champion and you really think you can make him work, definitely do give him a shot. B tier. Taric is gonna go into C tier. Some people do play him and try to make him work, but truthfully, Taric is really not that great. I don't recommend you to play a champion. Skarner. There we go. Next, Teemo. There we go. Next, Xin Zhao. Xin Zhao is gonna go into, I would say, like high B tier, like a little bit below Udyr. I think Xin Zhao does quite nicely in the current meta. He's really strong early on, scales really well if you have a lead and you know how to snowball with him, but after 25 minutes, 30 minutes, he just doesn't really do enough to be considered like great. So for that reason, he is gonna go into B tier. Ambesa. Ambesa is gonna go into, alright, low B tier. I think Ambesa is really strong on her own, but the only reason as to why she's strong in the first place is because she's played with Grasp and the items work really well for her. And truthfully, like, this champion can really get out of hand if you really know what you're doing. Oh, let me put it like a little bit higher. Sorry. Boom. That's perfect. So she deserves a spot in like mid B tier. Can snowball even harder than most of the champions in the B tier list, but she deserves a spot in B tier. So yeah. Briar. It hurts me to do this, but Briar is gonna go into C tier. I just barely see Briar, and she doesn't do enough to be higher. She's just too weak right now, and she kind of has like the Lilia syndrome in the sense that if you buff her, she completely breaks the jungle, and if you nerf her, well, she becomes completely useless. It's not quite exactly the same as Lilia, because Lilia will always be like super useful, but C tier is most definitely the way to go for her. Next, Zaranito. Zara is gonna go into Z tier. I think the champion is completely insane if you know what you're doing. Like, her clear speed is insane, her tempo is off the roof. She is the team fighting queen, and it's not even a contest, and for that reason she is gonna go into Z tier. Zed is B tier, does have quite a nice clear and can be good as a counter pick, but there's nothing extraordinary for Zed, so he's gonna go into B tier. Zac is gonna go into mid A tier. I think the champ has always been good in solo queue and will always be good. There's a lot of like Zac OTPs in Challenger, and I definitely think the champion is great. So if you're looking to find like an OTP champion that's fun to play and does nicely into most games, kills really hard, good against tanks, good against squishies, Zac's most definitely the way to go. He's a really fun champ. Rumble is gonna go into C tier. Unfortunately, like, the buff he received on his Q just made him too weak recently, and I don't really like him right now. I used to play him a lot with like Dark Harvest in the jungle and really did enjoy him, but right now doesn't quite cut it, to be fair. Seju is gonna go into a low A tier. I think she's a really good option as a tank jungler and does really well into the more meta junglers like Skarner, for example. She is often picked as a counter pick and not just as a blind pick, so that for that reason she's gonna go into A tier. And Nasus is gonna go into D tier. Do not play that champion. He is just not good and can get destroyed in the jungle like way too easily. Granted, you know what you're doing against Nasus, and for that reason he is gonna go into D tier. And that's gonna be it for this tier list, guys. If you have any questions regarding this tier list, make sure to put it down in the comments down below. If you're interested in getting coached by me, you can also check the description down below for my Discord server and you can join it. And I really do hope you enjoy this video and you enjoy season 15. And I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.